Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Perhaps you guessed by the thumbnail today, but we're going to be looking at an Australian watch. It doesn't happen very often. I think it's only the 5th or 6th Aussie owned watch that I've reviewed over the years, but it's always nice to look at a product by a company based in and inspired by my adopted homeland. And this is the first watch that I've looked at by Perth-based brand Houtman. It's not their first watch though, it's their second. They launched the Pilbara Diver last year and they followed that with this release of the Murchison sports watch. I gotta say, hats off to brand owner Jason. He's managed to get 4 watches out of the one case by changing the dial on the handset, and they look completely different from each other. There's a Flieger style, a tool watch style, one of them's a bit dressy, and one of them looks like nothing I've ever seen before. Now, being Aussie based means they're priced in AUD. That's probably a good thing for everybody. The Aussie dollar is weak at the moment, so if you are an Aussie, it's better to buy domestically than from overseas. And if you are buying in US dollars, for example, you can take advantage of that weak Aussie dollar and get a good exchange rate for your purchase. Now, you saw the pop-up. This video is sponsored by Houtman. I will therefore, of course, leave a link to this watch on their website in the description of the video. Plenty to get through today because there are 4 different watches to have a look at. But as always, the eternal question remains, are they actually any good? Let's flip the camera and find out. Alright, plenty to get through today then, clearly, as I have all 4 of these different colour versions to show you. Now, the watches I have in hand are all pre-production prototypes. The brand is taking pre-orders now, with shipping occurring in a couple of months' time. They have made a few small changes between these protos and the production units. Actually, a lot of my moans and niggles have been addressed, which is a good thing, but I've still got a couple, of course. All 549 Aussie dollars, as you can see there. Like I said, depending on where you are in the world, depending on the current exchange rate, that could end up being a pretty good deal, I think. Now, this watch isn't Seiko powered or Miyota powered, it's Sellita 200 powered. Also comes in a nice little leather pouch. Comes on a leather strap as standard with a suede strap in the box as well. I will of course show you on the suede shortly. 2-year warranties and free shipping also worth noting early on. So I'm going to start with this one. This was my favourite. This is the one that drew me to this watch in the first place. Jason calls this the burnt earth. I guess it is slightly salmon dialed as well, but very much reminiscent of the red earth of Western Australia. Kind of running theme through his watches. He's a proud Western Australian, as most of them tend to be, so he brings that to bear with his designs as well. One case, 4 different watches though. This is the second. This is the Aviator. Kind of an old school Flieger almost, with that vintage train track around the outer edge. Shiny black dial. White numerals, white handset, all really nicely legible. This is the one to go for if you are interested in legibility as a primary concern. This is the River Loom. This is not the one to go for if you're interested in legibility as a primary concern, I don't think. Kind of small blued leaf handset here. This one really does it showing off after dark, and of course I will show you a Loom video in due course. This 4th and final version is known simply as the Sport. There's a clue in the name there. It's clearly the most sporty of the 4, and I guess the most versatile and best all-rounder of the 4 as well. It's also the only one with applied indices and a totally different handset to its brothers. Right, so that's the 4 different versions. Quite sensible actually, I think, coming up with 4 different looks from the one case. 4 overlapping markets you're therefore potentially selling your watch to. But like I said, they all have the same case, they all have the same basic set of dimensions, basic set of specifications. Now, I think you should pay attention to these dimensions. They are rather important if you're keen on one of these. It's a 40-20, so 40mm in diameter and 20mm lug width, but I think it's a fairly big, fairly chunky 40-20. Thickness of just under 12 for production units with a lug to lug of just over 47. Now, just under 12 is not particularly slim considering this has a Sellita 200 in it. It would be slim with a Seiko, but it's not slim with a Sellita, and the whole thing generally feels quite chunky. 87 grams on the leather strap, again that's a little chunkier than I would have expected, and 160 on the bracelet sized up for my 7-inch wrist. Again, that's a little bit chunkier than you would expect from a 40-20 steel watch that isn't a diver. I think I know the reason why it feels particularly chunky, this one. All will be revealed shortly. There's plenty going on with the case here, a variety of different finishes used. There's a fine brush to the mid case, high polish chamfer, fine brush again on the upper lug. 3-piece case, so that's a fixed bezel, but there's 2 different finishes on the bezel. There's a high polish scallop, flat sapphire crystal nestling in there, and they are going to add a few more layers of anti-reflective undercoating for production units. Case back, I'll show you the case back in just a second. Drilled lugs here, meaning it's easy to swap out for various straps and things if you are inclined to do that. Screw down crown, 100 meters of water resistance. They're actually going to make that crown slightly larger for production units as well, which is good. Like I said, it's a chunky watch. I think it deserves a chunkier crown than that one. So 2 straps come as part of the package. The bracelet is actually an option, but it's an option box I think you should tick because it's only 80 Aussie dollars. 80 Aussie dollars is really, really good. What's that, about 60 USD? Maybe a little less than 60 USD? What do you get from Strapcode for 60 USD these days? You get nothing. You might get the clasp if you're lucky. It's one of those beads of Jubileer style, flat Jubilee, kind of beads of rice crossover. They're going to make that quick release for production units. We have solid end links, solid links with screws. I had no problem adjusting it. And it's a nice clasp. Pretty basic stamping of the Houtman logo there, double security pushers, milled upper, milled lower. Not quite as smooth and refined as it might have been, but then again, they're not charging an awful lot for it. And the best part is, it's got micro adjustment built in. It's one of these ratcheting ones with 4 different positions. Pull that out and then 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way back in. Really pretty good for 80 Aussie, I must say. Dial and hands, where do I even begin? Because there are 4 watches here and I don't want to take all day. Well, let's kind of have a look at the pairs. Burnt Earth and Sport first. 2 quite different looks here. Obviously you have large painted numerals on the Burnt Earth, whereas you have rectangular indices applied all the way around on the sporty one. There's a kind of grey sunburst effect to the sports, whereas there's a gentle salmon into grey fume from the Burnt Earth. The Burnt Earth has simple black leaf hands and a very long and slender black needle hand. They've kept the dial printing and the branding to a minimum on all of them, just the Houtman brand name above the pinion and automatic 100 meters beneath it. There's a black chapter ring here as well, but the minute markers are fairly indistinct. As I said, this is the dressiest of the 4, I think anyway, so minute markers aren't as important. Whereas I think they're more important on this sports model. Indices and hands are all in brushed silver, and there's a fairly mild sunburst effect to the grey dial as noted. This one does have more prominent minute markers and little Arabics on the 5s around the outer edges of the dial, but the same low-key branding. Next to then, and I guess the aviator on the left is most similar to the Burnt Earth in terms of the applied numerals. I do like those white hour and minute hand and the half black, half white second hand, paddle second hand, meaning it is rather prominent against that glossy black dial. There's a little step up to the train track minute track. Again, white on black, everything nice and crisply printed, nicely done. And then there is the River Loom. Now this one is a sandwich dial. You wait till you see it after dark. They've used a whole bunch of different shades of loom. Jason was telling me this has been the most popular pre-order so far. I guess it offers something that people haven't seen before. I certainly haven't seen it before. Not at its best during the day, I would say this one, not massively legible. Those hands could be doing with being a little bit larger. It'll be back in the moans and niggles section later on. But yeah, a really interesting look. Alright, before we get these watches on wrist, I told you I thought I had worked out why they were a little bit heavier and a little bit chunkier than I was expecting. And it's this guy, the big old roo on the case back. It looks fantastic. This is a kind of oil pressed, I would imagine, case back, and it weighs 16 grams. I know this because I took it off and I put it on the scales. If they'd used a simple lighter case back, it would have taken maybe 10 grams off the weight of the watch in total, but then it wouldn't have had a kangaroo on the back, would it? And while I had the case back off, I got to have a look at the movement, and therefore so do all of you. SW200-1 by Solita, 26 jewel, hacking and hand winding, roughly 40-hour power reserve and a high beat rate. You can also see a metal movement holder here rather than a plastic one, again adding weight and the perception of solidity. Alright, that's the watch on my 7-inch wrist as discussed. Yeah, definitely big and chunky, for a 40-20. Even if they trim 0.5 mil off the thickness of the case, which will definitely help, it's still going to be quite a big and chunky watch. Nice leather strap though. They haven't got the Houtman branding on the buckle and tang. They do have it underneath, but I'm a total sucker for vintage cross stitch in brown. Yeah, nice strap, nice and comfortable as well. And that's the aviator on the bracelet. Nice simple color scheme from this one. And yeah, nice bracelet. $80, definitely a bit of a bargain if you're in for one of these. And that, by the way, is the suede strap, which you get as part of the package along with the brown leather strap. I think the color, the gray color, really goes very nicely with this sports model. Very soft and comfortable, but probably not one that is going to last long term by its nature. Yeah, I think the more you wear this one, you'll wear it out pretty quickly. All right then, loom. No loom on the burnt earth, but we do have loom on the aviator on the left and on the sport on the right. Now, you might be expecting the sport with the applied indices to have the best loom, but if I turn the speed up on these, it's only narrowly ahead of the aviator, I think, at the end of the 20-minute test period. Loom is pretty good though. These are sports style watches. After all, you would expect some decent loom, and thankfully you get it. And if you're buying the river dial, then you are buying it for this after dark effect, I think. 3 different tones on the dial and a 4th tone for the handset. Yeah, pretty spectacular when you turn the lights out. Now, they are going to apply more loom to this one for production units, and I can see why towards the end here. Yeah, it's not quite as vibrant as you'd like it to. If you're buying it for that effect, then you want it to last as long as possible. All right, moans and niggles, where they're going to bulk up the crown and slim down the case, both of which I think are going to be beneficial. The hands on the full loom dial there, yeah, not particularly legible at all, but then the bigger you make the handset, the more it obscures the patterning on the dial, so you're in a bit of a catch-22 there. The rest of the hands, though, perhaps could have been slightly larger as well, maybe pushing out a little bit further, maybe a little bit broader on this aviator too. And if we turn to the prices, the pre-order price of $549 I think is fair. $8.99 AUD, full retail price. If you're watching this video in 6 months' time, I'm not quite sure that this one offers the same value now as it does today, if you see what I mean. And it's not really a watch I would describe as elegant or refined or sophisticated. So if you are looking for an elegant, refined and sophisticated watch, you'd probably be better served elsewhere. If you're looking for a chunky, robust sports watch with a giant marsupial on the back though, you should definitely check this one out. So there you have it, no shortage of variety there. Personally, I like the Thule one and I like the dressiest of the 4. Not a massive fan of that Loom Festival, even though it's the most popular. Do bear in mind, it is quite big for a 40-20. If you fancy a 40-20 that wears a little bit smaller than this, why not click here or here? Thanks for watching, see you all again in a future video, I hope.